Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I try to talk about smart things, but we're going to resume the Moment of Truth by talking about something real stupid. MSNBC. Don't know if you heard, but Stacey Abrams, she ain't doing so well in the polls. 4 years ago, she lost her bid to be governor of Georgia. Now, you'll recall that she didn't concede her loss 4 years ago. She kept complaining about voter suppression, which no doubt was a factor, but not the only one in her defeat. She lost that race by a mere 1.4 percentage points. That's it. Come to think of it, that's only a little bit more than the same amount that Andrew Bussy Gillum lost to Ron DeSantis by. But 1.4 percentage points in Georgia. That's all that Stacey Abrams lost her gubernatorial bid by. But since then, she's bellied up to the bar again, no pun intended, and she was so sure that she could paint Brian Kemp as Trump reincarnated, and the same way that black people were stirred by equal parts fear and anger to turn out 2 years ago to throw Trump out of office, she was just sure that the same strategy could be done at the state level in Georgia with the same results. After all, the white media's been portraying Stacey Abrams as being some sort of election genius. She's some sort of electoral savant. She's just an artist when it comes to turning out the vote and voter drives and, well, so far as we saw in Virginia, whenever she works her magic, the Democratic candidate loses. And it seems she's already beginning to see the same fate is going to befall her. Again. This time around, Stacey Abrams' polling is showing that she's down between 2 and 4 points, depending on who it is that you talk to. For weeks now, Abrams and her white DNC handlers, along with sympathetic elements in the white media, have already been laying the groundwork to blame black men for when she loses. Of course, they don't state it that way. What she says is, if black men turn out for me, I'm going to win. And everybody can read between the lines. If black men turn out for her, she'll win. But of course, what goes unsaid is if she loses, well, that's because black men didn't turn out for her. She had nothing to say to or about black men 4 years ago, and she hadn't had anything to say up until this year. But now that she's behind, and she doesn't see any other way to make up for that gap, which has gotten bigger since the one 4 years ago, she's mentioning black men all of a sudden. Now, the 2020 election has painted Stacey Abrams into a corner. She's not going to be able to scream voter suppression because the Democrats' entire message on elections since 2020 is that there has been absolutely no voter fraud. The elections officials, Republicans in the main, have been all on those congressional hearings, and the Democrats have been telling everybody why these guys are honest and above board, the Republican election officials. So if you lose a race, it's because you got beat fair and square. The system works. It wasn't because anyone was stuffing the ballots, and it's not because anyone was keeping voters from voting, because those same GOP officials that you saw at those January 6th hearings, those are the same ones who will also say, well, there hasn't been any widespread voter suppression either. So Stacey Abrams won't be able to do what she did 4 years ago and claim voter suppression. So since she can't claim that black people are being prevented from voting for her this time around, instead she's going to say, well, there's something wrong with black folks for not turning out. Now, she's not saying what she's going to do to incentivize black men to vote for her. She's not saying, here are your concerns, and I'm going to list them for you. Here's what I'm going to do about it. Instead, she says, well, you shouldn't expect much from me, and, well, if I lose, it's because black men didn't turn out. And the white media is backing up her talking point. Black men are making it a point to demand something for our vote, and the white media doesn't want that to become habit forming. They certainly don't want black women as an entire group to get on board with that too, because then the whole dang ship sinks. So the narrative is that Stacey Abrams should get black men's vote because she's not Brian Kemp. And the white media will be making sure to tell everybody, well, get mad at black men because those black men had the nerve to demand something for their vote. And they said they weren't going to vote unless they got something. So blame them. Don't blame her for not bringing anything to the table. Blame black men for making demands. Well, the white media strategy is failing. And speaking of white media failures, that brings us to Tiffany Cross-Eyes. Talk about clueless.
I do want to shift gears and talk about the midterm elections coming up. I want to turn to Georgia, which is on everyone's minds because less than 2 months out from the midterms. And at the center of the conversation among many black men, that rarely happens. And I want to center black men today. But Stacey Abrams is behind Governor Kemp. Now, Abrams says if black men vote for her, she'll win. But the math ain't really math in there. And I know Roland has a lot of thoughts about that. I want to bring into the conversation Cliff Albright. He's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund, and Terrence Woodbury. He's a Democratic pollster and CEO and founding partner of Hit Strategies. Cliff, I do want to start with you since you're on ground there in Georgia. Are black men large in number enough to decide this race for Stacey Abrams? Or is this just a headline that's, more yellow journalism and sensationalism than truth?
Whether or not they come out, we come out, black men in Georgia come out and support Stacey at the same rate that black women do is a legitimate question. Now, certainly black men aren't going to bear the brunt of what happens in this election on their own, no more than black women should bear the brunt of it. Some white folks could have to wake up and actually do the right thing in the state if they wanted to move forward. But I think that it is smart to raise this issue because at the end of the day, and we hate to admit it, but there is some number of black men that will just refuse to vote. It's the sexism, it's the patriarchy that just refuse to vote for a woman, whether that woman is Stacey Abrams or whether it was Hillary Clinton in 16. And that's an issue that we have to address. Again, that's not the majority of us. It's not a plurality of us, but we have to address that. And we have to be willing to call that out and call it what it is.
Now, this idiot came out of the gate trashing black men flat out, dismissing the very idea that a political discussion should mention black men. Is this yellow journalism? Isn't she supposed to already know the answer to that? When has Tiffany Cross ever described a discussion about Asians or Hispanics or even black women as yellow journalism? This is about distracting us. This is about trying to dictate to black people what we should think. Because it ain't just about black men. It's about the fact that as far as they're concerned, black men are just going to be the thin end of the wedge, the first domino to fall. They're trying to keep as many black folks on that particular treadmill as possible. This is about trying to control what we say. And she made sure to have some moist, weak chump whose first words were lies about black men and patriarchy and misogyny. And don't be stupid and act as if she didn't know he was going to say all that crap. When these clowns bring these shills on their shows, it's because they know exactly what they're going to say. You're already vetted. They already know that you're going to sell the soaps. They ain't got to worry about you saying something that's going to be off script. See, these fools knew that we would be picking this up and beat them like a drum over it. So you see how Cross Eyes and that moist fool and these others, they're talking about black men being misogynistic, but they always make sure to mix in some CYA tactics. Cross Eyes gives some clearly insincere disclaimers. Well, I'm not bashing black men or anything, but... And the moist dude says that white voters have to do their part, but black men are all a bunch of sexists and misogynists, and they'll vote for a white man before they vote for a black woman. This is sprinkling sugar on crap. And that's how she began this hit piece. Do you see Democrats talking to Hispanics like this? You see any Hispanic news anchors lecturing Hispanics or Asians for turning Republican in southern Texas? You had all those Hispanics down there on the border who started voting for Republicans. They put a GOP Hispanic Republican in office. This after all those Hispanic children were put in detention camps. No one's lecturing them. They don't lecture these other groups. They don't condescend to them. Nobody claims that there's a culture of misogyny among white people or Asians, or that white women should be shamed or lectured after they voted for Trump. Or how disgusting it is for white suburban women to not be solidly behind Democrats already, especially after Roe v. Wade was overturned. No, they save the lectures for black people. With these other groups, if Democrats are losing support among Hispanics or among women or among Asians or whomever, the white media narrative is, well, the Democrats need to change their messaging. They need to change their stance on a particular issue, change what they're saying. See, they don't blame these other constituencies for not voting for the Democrat or not voting for which way the white media wants them to, as if there's something wrong with them. The white media simply accepts what these other groups are doing and say that the Democrats need to make some changes. You don't see Biden or any other Democrats telling white women, if you can't decide whether to vote for the Democrats this fall, then you ain't a woman.
So Cliff mentioned Hillary Clinton. Terrence talked about Obama. We have to take this thing back a decade. Black men are the second most loyal voting bloc of the Democratic Party. Who's number one? Black women. So let's just be real clear who black men are voting for. In 2012, there was a 9-point gap between black men and black women, Obama-Romney. So people try to make this out to be about totally sexism. That's not true. We're two men running and black men. Black men were not happy with Obama. They felt he should have done more because on the issue of economics, on criminal justice, and no things along those lines. And so what then happens? You go to 16, now it's a 13-point gap. You go to 20, now it expands. Why? Because Democrats were ignoring that constituency. Black women also organized and mobilized to force the Democratic Party to pay more attention to them. I mean, in many cases, black men within the party have not actually done that. And I'm just going to go ahead and put it out here because someone has to say it. The fundamental problem with the Democratic Party is that white strategists are controlling the money, are controlling the strategy. Yes, African Americans are having input, but if you're trying to win, you better listen to black people. You better fund these initiatives. Otherwise, you're going to lose. And that gap is going to widen.
And invest in black media, brother. We know that.
Black-owned media, not black
media.
targeted.
Black-owned media.
Absolutely.
Now we see in a desperate bid to try to pretend as if he's got some credibility, Roly-Poly Martin points out the pig simple facts that the black media's been saying for the longest time. How black men in particular have been gravitating away from the Democrats for years. It didn't just start in the last couple of years. It's been going on since at least Obama. But keep in mind, Roly-Poly was also one of Barack Obama's biggest boosters. So this sudden change of tune on his part is because he knows that he's irrelevant. His little broom closet YouTube show ain't gone nowhere. He knows what the pulse of the black street is, and it ain't DNC Central. He knows he's got to talk like us if he expects anyone to take him seriously. And speaking of irrelevant, Cross Eyes attacked Tariq Nasheed by name, and even Kevin Samuels, of all people.
I will say, you know, a lot of black men sometimes feel like they're ignored or they're put down, particularly sometimes even by black women in the media. So this is not that. But I do hear Roland's point that felt ignored. But you feel ignored, and then you go over to the other side. The oppressed feel oppressed. So then you go and try to align with the oppressor. So I'm not putting black men down, but sometimes it's like, well, some of you Kevin Samuels following Tariq Nasheed quoting people, please look at the truth and see what's happening and get in line with some of the black women. Is majority, like he said, vote Democrat, but that margin of people who can be plucked away from your people and go advance policies that harm your people, I just don't understand that.
Kevin Samuels was a dating advice guy. And secondly, he's also dead, so it's doubly idiotic to be bringing his name up. But this is what happens when you're part of the white media. Basically, you're pretty much behind the times. Tiffany Cross Eyes is admitting that she has less influence than a dead YouTuber. You get that, Tiffany Cross Eyes? Because I know that you and your suck-up pals listen to me. By the way, you know this idiot blocked me on Twitter, right? I found that out. She had blocked me on Twitter. Reminds me of Corinne Stank-Pierre. She's in the White House, and she's hiding from Professor Black Truth. You got the so-called White House press secretary, and she would much rather deal with Fox News or Newsmax than to deal with the new voices of black media. And that tells you everything you need to know about these suck-up Negroes who go from white media organizations to the White House. But Tiffany Cross Eyes, she's admitting that she has less influence than a YouTuber who's been dead for several months now. A man who made his name giving dating advice has more political influence in his grave than Tiffany Cross Eyes does in her studio. Yep, white media can give you a platform, Cross Eyes, but what they can't give you is legitimacy. That's what you lack, and you know it. She talks down to black men the same way these white political consultants for the Democrats and Republicans do. Black people are so stupid, she thinks, and if you would just do like these good little Negroes over here, why, I could get a bonus from the DNC or the RNC this election cycle. See, the white media makes sure that when it comes to black people, the narrative is what black people need to do. Black people need to follow orders. And, well, if this gay marriage initiative doesn't pass in California, or if some other politician doesn't get what they want, it's all black folks' fault. They never blame Hispanics, they never blame Asians, they never blame white women, never blame white men, never blame any of these other constituencies, but they always make sure to single out black people by name. And it's not just these other non-black constituencies with the Democrats where this happens. With the Republicans never blame their base when they lose. Whenever the GOP loses an election, they always say it's because they weren't right-wing enough. They weren't hardline extremist enough. The Republicans don't lecture their voters or call them misogynist or dismiss their complaints. They never do that. The Republicans' voters are always right, even when they storm the Capitol and force those same Republicans to flee for their lives. If white men aren't voting for the GOP, then the entire conversation becomes, what do those white men want us, the Republicans, to do to get them back? It's about obeying white demands. That's what the discourse is. Not about dismissing them or shaming them or patriarchy or sexism or, well, they're just not engaged or these guys, they want too much. How very different the political discourse goes when it's not black people who are making the demands. But there's also some other things going on, no doubt, that are making Tiffany Cross-Eyes a little bit anxious. Don Lemonade got downgraded over on CNN. And with her ratings in the gutter, Simone Sanders probably isn't long for MSNBC either, assuming she hasn't already been sent packing. Tiffany Cross-Eyes is herself circling the toilet bowl, no doubt. So since Cross-Eyes knows that nobody's going to listen to her, she tries to raise her profile by attacking people who she knows black folks actually listen to. Now, rather than deliver her pathetic hit-and-run snide comments, if she really wanted to have an actual conversation and ask, well, why is it that black men are not fooling with the Democrats? What's going on here? Rather than talk about the new voices of black media, she could have talked to some of us. She could have invited Tariq on her show if she had such a big problem with what he says. But she didn't do that, because this is about trying to have a monologue. And Kevin Samuels is dead. Tiffany Cross-Eyes is a coward. She doesn't want black men's opinion. Her co-worker Simone Sanders said that she wanted black men to shut up. Black men need to shut up. This isn't about understanding black men's refusal to be good little DNC voters. This is about invalidating black men's objections because black men happen to be the first domino to fall and they're desperately hoping that they can stop any more black women from breaking bad on them. That's what they think they're doing. They think they're setting up a flood wall here. We're going to go ahead and prop this up. We're going to try to see if we can turn this into a gender war thing and get black women to feel as if, oh, black men, they're defying strong and independent black women. That's what's supposed to be going on here. See, when it came to this segment, there was no mention of abortion. Did you notice that? Gee, isn't Tiffany Cross-Eyes and Joke Reed supposed to be telling us how black people are all hot and bothered to keep abortion legal? And how that issue matters so much to black people? It's a crucial issue in the black community. But when it came down to it, here they are talking about Stacey Abrams about to lose, and black men are the ones who they're trying to pin it on, and nobody says, well, gee, if only she mentioned abortion more. Why didn't she say anything about abortion? You know how that's a hot button issue in the black community. Mention abortion. Yeah, because they already know where the black community stands on abortion. That's why. See, they know the issues that we're truly interested in. And their job is to get us to stop being interested in those things, stop talking about what's important to us, and get us to focus on what's important to white power. And I consider it poetic that Tiffany Cross-Eyes had Roly-Poly Martin on for this. Roly-Poly also tried online beefing with his betters in the pathetic hope that this would raise his profile and give him a leg up. It didn't work. CNN still ain't giving him a show. Don Lemonade's show's gotten axed. And they're not sitting here going, you know what would be a masterstroke right now? If we brought Roly-Poly out of that broom closet and put him back on TV, why, that'll bring the ratings in. So we see Roly-Poly is back on cable, but only as a guest, no show of his own. And he's still trying to get that white cable news show because he knows that he failed to gain a following online. And that's why you heard him whining that the Democrats need to hire him to be a political consultant. Because he didn't say his name, but for God's sake, he's sitting here, go ahead and say it. Yeah, Rolly, you've been saying for the longest time, and apparently the phone still hasn't been ringing. Democrats still ain't offering you no work. But consultants, see, that's one of those terms that Dr. Claude Anderson told you to watch out for. Bougie Negroes stay campaigning for a white consulting job. And what are these bougie Negroes consulting on? The best way to control black people. Roly-Poly looks like the fool he is talking out both sides of his mouth. This is the same chump who spent years dismissing our concerns and claiming that we didn't matter, that old black voters were all that mattered, and Democrats need to focus on them because younger black voters ain't gonna do a damn thing, and he got all profane and cursing with it. They love to do that with black folks. These bootlicks, they become their most insulting, their most profane, their most combative when talking at black people who aren't doing what their white paymasters want. And another thing, let's go ahead and kill that whole talking point that the reason that they're not dealing with black men is, well, black women are better organized than black men. When it comes to approaching the Democrats, that's not true. As I've documented for you for years now, when it comes to these organizations that these bootlicks are talking about, when they say black women, they're not talking about black women as a group. Who they're talking about are certain cherry-picked black female front women, told you about She the People and others. That's who they're talking about. They're talking about these black sororities, the Kamala Harris set. That's who they're talking about. Because I can't think of any organization of any note that has a black woman who's supposed to be the leader of it, who the white media and the white powers that be actually will return the phone call of, that is actually black grassroots. You look at them and you see who it is who set them up. You see who it is that funds them. And they're all organizations that were white funded and white founded. So no, there is no large, well-known or influential organization of any note that was started by black women. They were usually started by these white DNC people, these white dark money groups. You can go back in the archives on this very channel. I list for you who it is, who's involved with it. You go ahead and get the whole rundown there. But no, it's not a matter of black women are better organized. It's that white power has set up certain organizations, and these organizations do not do anything that's in black women's interests. This is about having Cross Eyes, MSNBC's resident mammy, to show her contempt for black men because they're scared that more and more black women are going to begin doing what black men are doing, and that is demanding something for our vote, and that would challenge and destabilize the entire pecking order. And by the way, I found it to be pathetic and puke-worthy, her phony liberation pap that she was spewing. That talk falls flat coming from her because over here, we don't pay lip service to black empowerment. We use terms like oppressor to describe not only the beneficiaries of white privilege, but also the entire system itself, along with its non-white advocates, its non-white operatives. We're not just talking about some unspecific white supremacists somewhere. We're talking about the entire system and of people who operate it, many of whom are not even white themselves. So Tiffany Cross-Eyes, she's using the words, but she has no clue what they mean. She certainly has no clue what these words mean to us. Cross-Eyes is a fool. The oppressor, quote-unquote, is someone who demands that you obey them and they do nothing for you in return, like the Democrats. The oppressor is someone who walks away when you tell them what you want them to do, like Bernie Sanders and Negro Jim Clyburn and Stacey Abrams and Elizabeth Warren have done whenever black people come up to them and demand reparations. The oppressor talks down to you, and when you tell them what you need, all they do is lecture you about why it's not feasible, or why they can't do it because of the Republicans, or in the case of Kamala Harris, just flat out say, you think I'm going to do something that only benefits black people? No! And then they turn right around and do things that will only benefit Native Americans, or Hispanics, or gays, and as far as they're concerned, well, that's just politics. So they can and routinely do things that only benefit specific groups, just not black people. That's what Democrats do, and we've been voting for them all along. They are the oppressor, no different than the Republicans. Both parties work together to oppress us. One party openly espouses anti-black racism, and the other party tells us there's nothing they can do about it. So you have an open aggressor on the one hand and controlled opposition on the other. That's a distinction without a difference. Tiffany Cross-Eyes and Stacey Abrams both work for the same employer, white power. One of them tells black people that she can't do anything for us and we need to accept that. And the other one lectures and browbeats black people for having the nerve to demand anything in the first place. Well, all the whining and complaining won't change anything. We know that this is a threat to the bootlick class, what we're doing. The Cross-Eyes and the Roly-Poly Martins and the rest of them. Their job is to make sure that black people are controlled. That's their job, to prove to white power that they can control and contain black people. That they can control and contain you and me. But they're showing that they're more than a little frustrated and flustered at this. Because all they can do is keep repeating the exact same failed strategies and getting the same failed results. But you notice how we don't say that they need to be doing some sort of broadcast or program about their own failures because nobody would pay attention to it anyway. We don't need a bunch of irrelevant bootlicks on cable TV who are going to call themselves speaking for us. Black people have already found and are embracing true advocates, the new voices of black media. And if you're dumb enough to call yourself ignoring what the black grassroots has to say, well, it doesn't matter if you get your paycheck from a multi-billion-dollar white corporation or from a multi-billion-dollar political party. The result will still be the same. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Sherman Marshall, Reasonable Dude, Maxie Robinson, Radia Bay, and Yamuka H. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.